Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Skating Penguin Network Mailbag here at the Skating Penguin Network. I am Garrett Bahana. Alongside me are my two co-hosts, Robbie Noggle and Snail. We are here to answer some more of your questions this week. Fellas, I don't know if you looked at the mailbag tweet that I had sent out over the weekend as we record this on January 22nd. We had like 44 or 45 tweets directed to the mailbag. So we have two extra large mailbags this week and next week because we are not going to answer all of your questions through these two sittings. I have already started to create a mailbag outline for next week with like 10 or 11 questions that were asked for this week's show that are like not as time sensitive. So if you asked a question this week and you didn't hear it either when this goes live on the 23rd or when we do our part 2, your question will be answered. It just may come a week later. That's how many questions we got in this week's mailbag, which is bonkers. But let's not waste any more time here. Let's get through some of these questions. Question number 1, we're talking about sitcoms here. Question 1 comes from Brian. Robbie, what's on your Mount Rushmore of sitcoms? For Brian, it's Friends, That 70s Show, Home Improvement, and Saved by the Bell. Are some of those shows on your Mount Rushmore of sitcoms?
One is, and again, the choices here are almost impossible to narrow down to 4. So I'm just gonna take my 4, and you guys can put yours in later. But Friends is on mine. How I Met Your Mother is on mine. MASH is on mine. And then the 4th, the 4th I really struggled with because there are so many good options that could go on here. Some older ones, some newer ones. But at the end of the day, I landed on Frasier as my 4. So I'm Friends, How I Met Your Mother, MASH, and Frasier is what I would consider my Mount Rushmore. But I could probably make multiple Mount Rushmores with different shows because there's so many good ones out there, not just recent ones, but ones that you now find in black and white. But so, yeah, I'm going to stick with Friends, How I Met Your Mother, MASH, and Frasier. And if anybody else wants to chime in with 4 theirs, go ahead.
I've got a list here, but I want to hear Garrett go first.
Okay. For me, it's going to be in no particular order. Seinfeld, Frasier. I grew up with my dad loves MASH. I grew up watching it, and like as I've gotten older, I've started to really appreciate it. So I'll say MASH for number 3. Number 4. You know what? I'll go Everybody Loves Raymond for number 4.
That's a great one. I mean, again, I could have easily put that one on there as well.
So there's my Mount Rushmore. Snail, what about you?
For mine, I had to go with number 1 is The Simpsons. That's just
Great,
like I still watch The Simpsons. I watch The Simpsons all the time still. I rewatch the first 11 seasons so often. The Treehouse of Horror every Halloween is on the holiday episodes. And then I think I've said this before. I don't know how many presidents are on Mount Rushmore, so I had 5 listed here. So it's going to be really hard to take one of these off. Peep Show is on there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Peep Show.
I'm familiar with it, but yeah,
okay. Hilarious. It's a British sitcom. Hilarious, so cringy, and it's just great. Next, I had Letterkenny. I've talked to you guys about Letterkenny on here. Canadian sitcom. Its last season just aired, so it's officially over as of right now. I highly suggest that to anybody. And then I guess for the fourth one, I had here, there was a short running TV show called People of Earth that I loved. It's like a sitcom about alien abductees. And then because there's only 2 seasons, it ended abruptly. It sucks. But have you guys seen What We Do in the Shadows?
Yes, my older sister and brother-in-law absolutely love that show, and I didn't know what it was. I think it's on FX or like the FX network.
It's
or
FX,
like
yeah.
That's fantastic writing. I mean, it is fantastic.
It's hilarious. We started watching it back in whenever it first came out. I want to say it was during COVID, and during COVID they were one of the only shows that somehow were able to keep putting out like a new season and getting production going. I rewatched that show a ton and I love it. So I'll go with Simpsons, Peep Show, Letterkenny, and let's just throw What We Do in the Shadows in. It's a newer one, but it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many choices on this. You could go on forever. I mean, but yeah, it's really hard to pick a sitcoms. I could have put Always Sunny on there. I could have easily put Seinfeld and Everybody Loves Raymond on there, but and Snail, just for reference, there are 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore.
I'll try to remember that next time.
All right, question number 2, again from Brian here, going to Snail. He asks, are you worried that Olympic hockey, as in NHL participation in the next Olympics, is not going to get sorted out in time?
I don't know if I'm like one of the only people that feels this way. I'd be curious how you feel, but like it's an easy answer for me, and that's no. I'm not worried about it. I feel like they've already fumbled the bag for a couple Olympics. Seeing Sid play with like a young Connor McDavid and Nate McKinnon. I mean, Sid's kind of he's having a tremendous season. I'm not trying to say he's over the hill, but like I feel like some of the best the best Olympic teams, like, I don't know, I just feel like they missed like a really prime opportunity for where the generations like within hockey are at right now. Not saying I wouldn't be looking forward to a like NHL player inclusive like Olympics, but I'm not really worried about it. I heard they haven't even started like digging for that rink in, is it Italy, wherever the Olympics are next. I think they'll figure it out, and if they don't, it's like, I don't know, is that maybe why the NHL agreed to have that like 4 country World Cup type deal, like if this doesn't get off the ground? I don't know. I'm a little bit just soured on the whole Olympic thing at this point. It's such a fuss every time it comes around, and they haven't delivered. So at this point, it's just like, just let me know when it's a go, and then I'll get excited about it. I'm sick of the rumination over it and the what ifs and the disappointment. So I'm just like not even really that worried about it, Brian. All right, Garrett, question number 3 is again from Brian. Are we ever going to get an update on Hooks? He's talking about Hooks Orpik, this character, I'm assuming, and maybe a reappearance when one of you aren't available.
I failed to realize as I was putting this together, the outline, how many people are so curious about the whereabouts and the doings of our overlord at Pennsburg, Hooks Orpik. I texted him. We were recording this on Monday the 22nd. I texted him when I got off work last night at 11:30, and I said, the people want an update about you. And look, Hooks is incredibly famous. I say that with a wink and a nod. So, but he hasn't gotten back to me yet. So, Brian, I will keep you in the loop. If I get an update from Jimmy, I will give it to you. We're recording part 1 today. This is Monday. So if I get an update between now and when we record next Thursday, I will share it on the next podcast for everyone who is interested. That is quite the throwback, because if you were listening, I mean, Hooks predates Robbie, and Robbie's been here for like 30 years now. So that just goes to show how old I am and how long I've been doing this. But when Hooks left, he said he wanted to devote more time to other hobbies and things, so he stepped back from podcasting, and that's where Robbie came in. And now Robbie is just as much of an anchor as I am, and we just have this third wheeler Snail just latching onto our coattails because we're that famous. I mean,
riding coattails, baby, just how I planned it.
I can't help that Robbie and I are the 2 most famous people at the Skating Penguin Network, and you know the accomplishments that we have compared to Snail. It's just, it's just the way of the world works. So
I can't even go outside anymore.
exactly, like I have to order groceries.
Nice.
I have to order groceries at Walmart online and do like an online pickup, and then I go to Walmart and I'm in like a trench coat, dark sunglasses and a ball cap because, Anyway, that's for the commoners to figure out whenever they start to hear this. But that's a conversation for another time. As we move on to question four, also from Brian, going back to Robbie here. Robbie, do you think the success of the U.S. development program, do you think that success of that program means that other countries are going to follow suit with a similar program?
So I think the U.S. development program and its success is more of a catching up than a charting new waters in terms of international hockey, because all your hockey powers, Canada, your Swedes, your Russians, all of them have some kind of development program for these young guys and have for years that allowed them to be powerhouses. And it just took the United States this long to catch up. Now, I will say that at the rate it's going, it may be time for some of these countries to rethink their development programs to keep pace with what the United States is doing, because right now they are just pumping out talent at an obscene level. You saw it at the World Juniors where they were barely threatened in any of their games. I think they took one game to overtime or a shootout, but they dominated the host Sweden. They didn't get a chance to play Canada because Canada did not even make the medal round. So I think at some point, if this success keeps up, it's going to be whether or not these other countries have the resources to dump into just keeping pace with what the United States is doing. Because if you look at this 4-team tournament that's supposedly coming next year, you look at the prospective rosters, the United States probably has the best roster. You look at 2026 Olympic rosters, the United States may enter that as at worst a co-favorite with Team Canada. There is so much talent in this program right now, and we're really just starting to scratch the surface of them being a competitive international force to the point where they are favorites walking into these tournaments, especially when you start involving NHL players. So the success of the development program has been phenomenal. It looks like it will only continue. So as it has since caught up to where it was lacking, and now it will be up to these other countries to take their development programs to this next level or risk being left behind by what the United States is putting out there right now. Question number 6, we're switching over to Tony Gale here, and we got Snail in the batter's box for this one. Tony asks, over halfway now in the season, what are your predictions who will be in the Stanley Cup Final? I did not ask you the right question.
I was like,
so this is from Brian, actually. Tony will go to Garrett, but Brian asked, do you like the captain choices for the All-Star game and the celebrity representatives?
Yeah, so the captains are Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and I believe a co-captaincy here with Jack and Quinn Hughes for the Metro coming from the New Jersey Devils. And I'm fine with that. I'm old now. It's their league. It's these players' NHL now. It's crazy seeing, like, for how many years was it, like, Sid Novi, like at the All-Star game, like chumming it up on the sidelines, like Jumbo Joe Thornton or a Pavelski, Anze Kopitar. They might still be there, but like those were like the big guys that were captaining teams, and now it's like, I mean, it's much deserved. So I don't see an issue with that at all. And then what I was actually really anticipating was the celebrities that were going to be included, because with the NHL, you don't know who they're going to pull out, because they don't have, I would say, the power that like an NBA or an NFL has. Like, you're not going to see like a Rihanna or I don't know, name a mega star. Like, I was going to say Britney Spears, but I don't think she would have. The celebrities that the NHL got for the All-Star game is Justin Bieber, Will Arnett, Michael Bublé, and Tate McRae. And I think that it's just like, that's just like I mean, they all, like, Justin Bieber's like a Toronto fan. Will Arnett's a Toronto fan. Michael Bublé's a Canadian, like, he's Canadian, right? He's a Canucks fan.
Vancouver.
He's a big Canucks guy. And Tate McRae's from Calgary. I thought Tate McRae is the biggest get for them. I don't know if you guys have any opinion on that.
I think right now she probably is. I mean,
she's got to be the biggest, like, get for them. Because I think those Bieber, Arnett, and Bublé, like, I don't think they're older. I don't know. Tate McRae is kind of out of left field, I would say. And
who is Tate McRae?
She's a country singer. She's like a young up and coming country singer from Calgary, and she's sick. She's actually really awesome. I don't really listen to a ton of country, but I don't know. I like a little country. I think Tate McRae's awesome, and she's super hot too. So great get for the NHL, I think, in her, because that's going to attract the young crowd, like a younger. It's for younger people anyway. The All-Star game is for younger folks, and having a guy like Tate McRae, I think, is gonna be good for the NHL. Justin Bieber's still young, but I think it's like he's actually like, I mean, but Justin Bieber was like somehow big when I was in high school, like over a decade ago. So I don't know how he's honestly kind of still kicking around. Does he even still make music anymore?
I would imagine.
Yeah, I think he does. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird to think that he's like an old celebrity now.
Yeah.
Been in the spotlight a long time. So those are my thoughts on the celebrities. The captains, like I said, it's their NHL now. These are going to be the captains you probably see. These are going to be the familiar faces at the All-Star game for the next decade. So unless you guys have anything to chime in on the All-Star game, let's move on. And I'll ask Garrett here a question from Tony Gale. Over halfway now in the season, what are your predictions for who will be in the Stanley Cup Final?
All righty, we're at the halfway point of the season. Let me look at some of the standings here. So the Jets, and we've talked about the Jets before on the podcast. They've come out of nowhere. The Canucks have also come out of nowhere in the West. You have the Avalanche up there. They're 7-3 in their last 10. The Oilers have made like the turnaround of the century, winners of their last 13 games after their horrendous start. In the East, the Bruins and the Rangers are atop of their respective divisions. As far as Stanley Cup Final goes, for me, the Bruins. I'll say the Bruins come out of the East. As far as the West, I think the East is obviously weaker than the West. The Jets, I don't buy the Jets as the Jets and Canucks. I don't buy either of them. Prove it to me over a longer period of time and prove to me this isn't a flash in the pan. I'll say the Bruins come out of the East, and I'll say, you know what? I'll say the Oilers come out of the West, and McDavid finally gets into a Stanley Cup Final against the Bruins. Anybody else going once? Going twice?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll chime in here real quick. Yeah, the East just feels like a complete jumbled mess. I'm gonna say the Panthers go back to back out of the East.
That'd be my pick too, Rob.
Yeah, I just feel they got hot. I just feel that it's coming for them. It's all going to start clicking here like it did last year in the second half. I just don't trust anybody out of that Metro. The Rangers have cooled off significantly.
They're not the real deal.
The Flyers, I think, will make the playoffs at this point. I just don't. They're just not ready. The Hurricanes, the scoring isn't there to keep up.
Or goaltending either.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I didn't think about the goaltending. The West, like you said, I just don't I trust the Jets more than I trust the Canucks. But I think when it all comes down to it, I'm going to go a little dark horse here. I'm going to say Dallas comes out of the West.
Not a bad choice. They're good. They've got that great goaltender. They've got a great decor. They've got a mix of young studs and good veterans.
Yeah.
I'm going to chime in here and say I think it's got to be right now. It's always like a what if with health. We saw the Florida Panthers flame out in the Stanley Cup Final last year because of health. They were just so banged up by the end. But if I think they're going to make a deadline acquisition too, I doubt that they're going to stand pat and not add. What they add, I'm not quite sure, but they've got goaltending. They've got Bobrovsky, and I think they've got a little bit of depth goaltending as well. That decor, I'm pretty envious of. They all can move the puck and have bite. I think they're going to miss Gudis, though. I think not having Gudis, I assume if they make a deadline acquisition, they go after some piss and vinegar. Not that they don't need any more on that team. Everyone's a prick on that team, but they might get a big body that it's hard to move in front of the net or something that'll scream in a goalie's face when they win in overtime. Maybe a four. I'm taking the Panthers, I think, to make the Stanley Cup Final, and then out of the West, it's for me. I'm hoping that it's a Canadian team. They deserve it. I love what's going on in Vancouver. I've loved Rick Tocchet for a long time. I love the way that he's got this team playing like a bunch of assholes. I love that Lafferty up there. They're going to make a deadline move too. They're only going to probably improve. I think it's going to be Vancouver, or it's going to be, like Robbie said, I think it's Winnipeg. They've got the structure. They've got a goal. They've got a hell of a goaltender. I think the best goaltender in the NHL right now is Hellebuck. They've got a bunch of great forwards, depth. That Lowry is a great captain for that team. Let's go Winnipeg, Florida.
Winnipeg, Florida. Alrighty. Let's keep talking about the Stanley Cup here as we go to question 7 from Andreas Castle. What do you think the chances are, Robbie, that a Canadian team finally gets over the hump to win a Stanley Cup this season?
So I think looking at the standings, you have really 4, I'd say, good options looking at right now. You obviously have Winnipeg and Vancouver carrying the torch right now. Edmonton's coming, and then Toronto. But I will be straight up. I do not trust the Maple Leafs this year. They just do not. The vibes are so bad. So out west, Vancouver and Winnipeg again. If Thatcher Demko keeps playing the way he is, and Connor Hellebuck keeps playing the way he is, could easily carry either of those teams. Edmonton has just been torrid. I mean, they've won 13 in a row. They've clawed their way back in. They're still a ways away from threatening the Canucks, but they do have games in hand, so it's tough to. It's hard to say if those games play out like they need to. They could be right back in the thick of it. It just kind of shows you how hard it is to bounce back when you start off the season in a hole. They won 13 in a row, and they're still just on the bubble of the playoffs. They're currently in the playoffs, but they're right on that bubble. So if Edmonton gets in, not a team I'd want to face. I'd put their chances at. I mean, it's so hard to win. It's so hard to win the Stanley Cup, as we know. There are just so many good teams out west. You know, I think that the Cup champions are going to have to come from the West. So to get through that gauntlet and then have to face a good team from the East like the Panthers or Bruins, I'm going to put it at like 30%. We see a Canadian team win, just simply because it's just so hard. So hard to get through that Western gauntlet and then still survive to win the Cup. So, yeah, I think your best chances out of the West between the Jets, Canucks, and Oilers, unless a team like the Flames would catch a spark. But I just don't trust the Maple Leafs out east. So my best bets for the Canadian Stanley Cup champion this year still low, but I'm looking at the Jets, Canucks, or Oilers as the best bets. Question number 8. Brian says he's getting back on the Max Domi to Pittsburgh train, a train that has been chugging along for quite a few years now. He wants to know if anybody else is joining him. He struggled in Toronto a bit, so he thinks a change of scenery could be of benefit.
I'm hesitant to catch a ride on that train right now. I wouldn't have minded that in the off season, but maybe to use a stat that Robbie listed earlier that I thought was awesome. I can't the vibes are bad. I wonder when the analytical nerds are going to find a way to measure that with statistics. But Max Domi, not having the season that Toronto wanted him to have. I think he had a hell of a run with Dallas in the playoffs, and he's shown at times to have glimpses of being just an awesome, pesky centerman. That he's got speed. He's creative. He's a creative centerman, I would say. So yeah, I mean, I would take Max on the team. I like what he brings, but I think the problem with this question for me right now is that I actually like Lars Eller at 3C. I don't know about you guys. I like Lars Eller. I like Drew O'Connor on his wing. I would say for me, if I'm looking at hypothetical train rides to get on here, backing certain players to bring into Pittsburgh, I'm looking for a right shot third line winger. That's what I'm looking for. That, like, I don't think Max would necessarily fill that role. He could. He's a versatile player, but I think he's proven over his career that he's better at center, with his foot speed and creativity and playmaking ability. I don't know if he's fit to be. I don't know if he's best suited to be a winger. So might I suggest revisiting a sort of a change of scenery type scenario that actually involved Max Domi at one point when the Habs traded Max Domi to Columbus for Josh Anderson. And this is a train that I've been beckoning, come one, come all, let's get on this train, because this is the type of player that Pittsburgh needs, and that's Josh Anderson. He's a right winger with great foot speed, tenacity. He's a great forechecker. He's the perfect third line center. He fights, he scores. He scored some big goals for both Columbus and the Habs in their playoff runs that they've been in. That's the train that I'm buying a ticket to, Brian. I'm looking for a third liner, depth player that can he was a top 6 player in Columbus, top six player at times with Montreal. Middle 6 forward, I guess, is what I'd call him. So yeah, I don't know. Max Domi, to answer your question, Max Domi, I'm iffy on. I'd be looking for maybe something else to slot in on that third line for the Penguins. All right, Garrett, question number 9 here from Brian. He asks, other than Lemieux, whose career trajectory in Penguins history would you change if you could? He mentions here Pouliot, Desprez, and Murray, all good options here, but I think Bennett or Tangradi would be my final choices.
I was convinced when they recalled Derek Pouliot. This would have been 2014 or 2015. I was convinced when they recalled Pouliot that he was going to be like the next big thing. I think his debut was against the Florida Panthers. I think he scored in his first game or one of his first games, and I was like, yeah, this is the next coming. This is Chris Letang's replacement. I'm like, this is it. We and then 8th overall pick. I mean, yeah, it's perfect. Like Pouliot, and then I think to his credit, I think Derek Pouliot is still in the NHL. I think he's on an AHL contract. I would imagine if he's not, Snail, you're shaking your head. Where is Derek Pouliot today?
I could be wrong, but I swear I saw a thing that he's playing overseas.
Oh, that's a possibility.
I'll check it out quick.
I was convinced it was Derek Pouliot. The first player I remember I watched at like a prospect camp was Bo Bennett, and I was like, Bo Bennett, next big thing. I mean, I was like, 11 years old at the time. I was like, next big thing, Bo Bennett is going to be on Crosby's wing, and it's going to be game over for the rest of the league. Of course, injuries did not play into Bennett's favor, as he will jokingly tell you at this point. He's always been a good sport about the injuries, and I'm starting to get a smile on my face. Robbie and Snail probably too. Do you remember the meme that went around when they won the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, about the ambulance parade. Yeah, that was actually that was a very, very just well thought out meme. Like, that's one of the better ones I've ever seen. I think Bo Bennett might have retweeted it too.
I mean, props to Bo Bennett for playing along with it. I mean, players in that scenario could have been all curmudgeon-y and been like, yeah, I didn't get my fair shake. But he rolled with the punches, and it was fantastic. So Bo Bennett definitely up there. Derek Pouliot for me definitely up there. Simone Dupre really didn't work out, and then I think Jim Rutherford traded Dupre. And then he had started to have some concussion issues out west. But yeah, Bennett and Pouliot for me, especially, maybe it's just because it's recency bias, but those two players for me would definitely be ones that I would be changing the trajectory of.
Quickly, let me just add
ahead.
quickly here. So I don't know what I don't want to give people bad information. I thought maybe he'd played overseas. He's actually playing in the AHL right now. He's got 34 games, 6 goals, 20 assists for 26 points, 43 PIMs. Dude, he has been a suitcase since he broke into the league in 2014, 2015. With the Penguins, 2014, 2015, and then it was 2015, 2016. He played 22 games with the Penguins, 11 games the next year, and then 2017, 2018, he played 71 games for the Vancouver Canucks, 22 points. 2018, 2019, he played 62 games again for the Canucks. He then played for the St. Louis Blues. A couple years, it looks like, here in the minors with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Vegas Golden Knights, he had 2 games. He played 9 games for the Seattle Kraken. I had no idea that even happened, right under my nose in my backyard. San Jose Sharks, he played 8 games last year, and then this year he's firmly planted in the AHL. So it's not quite over for Derek Pouliot, former 8th overall pick.
Keeping the dream alive. We respect the grind. Question 10, going back to Robbie here. Robbie, if you were given the job of modernizing the names of some of the awarded trophies every offseason, which names would you choose?
I think so. We'll start with, just off the top of my head here, the Jack Adams, which is Coach of the Year, would have to be a Scotty Bowman trophy. Again, probably the greatest coach in NHL history. Definitely got to be there. Norris, I don't know how modern we want to go, but I think Orr is probably the rightful name of that one. Just because, I mean, he's arguably, if I'm basically not even arguably, the greatest defenseman, completely transformed that position. And trying to think, rookie's hard because, I mean, how do you
Solani, may I suggest?
Solani could be on there. I mean, he has one of the great rookie seasons. Vezina, people would probably argue Brodeur. I would argue Hasek, personally, but that's just my 2 cents on that. What do I got left here? The Selke best defensive forward is obviously should be the Patrice Bergeron trophy. I think that's goes without saying, just a complete force there. And MVP, I think people would default to Gretzky. I'm going to say that should be the Gordie Howe trophy, just because of the legacy and all that. And, everything he's done for the game. I would go Gordie Howe for the what is today the Hart trophy. Question number 11, jumping back to Snail over here. Would you rather target a defenseman or forward at the trade deadline?
At the trade deadline, if it's a defenseman, it's got to be a very specific defenseman. Granted, there's a couple things that need to be a factor here. That one of those things being that the Penguins need to be firmly in a playoff spot, not, a point or two outside. I just don't know. I don't know if that's the gamble that Dubas and co are going to be making. I think that if, let's say they're firmly in a playoff spot and they have health on their side. Health is the other really key component here to what they go out and acquire at the deadline. And no specific order either on those. But if it's a D-man, it's got to be a shutdown D-man. We have Chris Letang and we have Erik Karlsson, who are almost like a fourth forward out there at times. I've been saying this all year, with those 2 guys taking up quite a few minutes of ice time on the back end. You need people that are able to stop goals from going in your net and stop bad things from happening, which is a lot to put essentially on one player. Like, that's one player. When you've got, like an ace of spades line out there, like Sid, Gensel, Rust, and then you have a Karlsson or Letang, you've got one guy whose job it is to keep all hell from breaking loose in their own end. So if I'm going out, I'm thinking about a shutdown guy. There's, of course, every great team has a good shutdown pair or a good shutdown defenseman. Chris Tanev's name is out there. Chris Tanev, we're familiar with his younger brother. Was it Brent? What's his name? Chris Tanev, and then I'm spacing on Tanev's the other
Brandon
Tanev. Okay, Brandon Tanev. He has a brother named Chris Tanev who just eats pucks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He's unrestricted free agent, I believe, at the end of this year. He's on Calgary, who I don't know if they're a lock to make the playoffs. They're playing all right now. A guy like him, I know he's a right shot, but I mean, dude, with Carlson or Letang being the rovers that they are, you put Chris or Eric on their offside, their offhand wing, and you put Chris Tanev just to lock it down defensively. I wouldn't mind a move like that. But they do have plenty of D depth right now. Not all of it's great depth, but they do have some depth. I think what they need is depth scoring. I'd probably lean towards going out and grabbing a depth forward at the deadline. And some names that I just think that should be on that list, want list for depth forwards would be, I don't know how Kessel doesn't have a job yet, and I know that there are some Penguins fans that are iffy on bringing a guy like Kessel back because they did get rid of him. There was some chatter, some rumors that he wasn't getting along too well with Malkin at some point. We have no idea if any of that is true or not. They seem to still have a great relationship. Every time they play, they're laughing, high-fiving, playing tummy sticks. So I'd be keen on bringing. I think he'd be great on the third or the fourth line right wing. Josh Anderson, like I'd mentioned, I've always wondered what it would take to pry a guy like Brendan Gallagher away from the Montreal Canadiens. I think he's a perfect right shot, like a third liner. He's a forechecking machine. He can play net front pretty well, even though he's not the biggest body. I wonder about a guy like Brendan Gallagher. And depending on where the Minnesota Wild are at when it gets closer to the trade deadline, they've kind of had a rocky season. We know they're in cap hell. They've kind of hit some ruts this year, and it looks like at times maybe they're not going to be a playoff team. I'd wonder what it would take to get a guy like a Pat Maroon or a Brandon Duhaime off the Minnesota Wild. And these guys are not, they aren't like a Kessel or a Josh Anderson by any means what they're scoring, but I think Maroon's a great glue guy for a playoff push or a playoff run. He's greasy along the boards. He used to be a top 6 player. He doesn't have the wheels for it anymore, but he knows how to score. He's just slippery around the front of the net, kind of like a Corey Perry. Duhaime's a tough guy, just a tough, rugged winger. I'd take a guy like that any day. So that's where my thoughts are on what the Penguins should target as of right now at the trade deadline. Again, there's a lot that needs to happen before they're in a position to do that. So hope that shines a little bit of light on that subject. Brian, any of you guys got anything you want to chime in on as far as whether you target a D-man or a forward?
No,
I'd say forward's probably the most pressing issue. I will say one name that you mentioned there. I follow a lot of people, a lot of writers that cover Canadian hockey and the Canadians, and they say that Brendan Gallagher is just straight up washed. He just washed.
A lot of miles on the body.
Yeah, a lot of miles. Again, the size, great for what he did, given his size throughout his career. But they said he can't skate anymore. There's absolutely no scoring there. And they just said that they really just they don't see much trade value there. Somebody might bite on him, but
maybe they couldn't even get rid of him if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean they're not he's if he brings anything, it may be like some kind of conditional 7th round pick or something like that. But they just don't see their feeling is a serious playoff contender. There's going to be better options out there. So
wow, okay. Thanks for shining light on that.
Yeah, that's just the vibe that they've been giving off. They just said that it's just so much of what made him great is just gone now that he's up there in age, and the beating he's taken over the years just doesn't seem to have taken its toll at this point.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I don't watch a ton of Habs games or whatever, but just from seeing from when they made especially that cup run during the COVID year, he was such a bastard. It looked like to play against.
Yeah. He's always killed the Penguins too, so.
He has. Every time the Penguins play the Habs, I notice him at some point or another in the game and just thought, he's a perfect pesky skater. But anyways, I guess the wheels are sort of falling off. He wasn't like a super high draft pick either, and he made such an impact with that Habs team. So
yeah.
Anyways, all right, we'll move on here, and this is the last question of the mailbag for, I guess, our 3-parter this week. Going over to Garrett. Brian asks you, are any of you guys fans of pierogies? What's your favorite way to cook or eat them?
Do I love pierogies?
Is this a Pennsylvania thing?
It's
it's Polish thing. more than
Polish.
anything.
Yeah, a lot of Polish immigrants came over this part of the country at the turn of that would have been the turn of the 20th century, I guess.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, is the sky blue? Is grass green? You put a plate of pierogies in front of me, it's over.
Yeah.
I will demolish all of them. The best way to make them or cook them, what we do in my family, we boil the pierogies first in a pot of water, and then we pan fry them with onion, butter. It's so good. Robbie, any good pierogi stories for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no bad way to cook a pierogi, I should say. Like for big events, we'll have people just throw like bags of Mrs. T's into a slow cooker and with butter, and onion. I prefer homemade pierogies over Mrs. T's. But that, I mean, I think that's natural for anybody that would have them. I will unfreeze them by boiling them, and then I will put a little butter and the pierogies in a pan, like you said, and saute them up, get a nice little crisp going. And impossible to beat. I love pierogies.
So I'm looking at them right here. I don't think I've ever had a pierogi. It's essentially, it looks kind of like a dumpling or a pot sticker.
It's basically that with mashed potatoes in the middle. I mean, you can actually get all different kinds of flavors, but potato is the most common.
I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
No.
Pierogies for the win.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, with that, we get through part one of this week's mailbag. For Snail, for Robbie, I have been Garrett. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the mailbag here at the Skating Penguin Network, and we will talk to all of you again very soon.